Okay, so welcome everybody. It's Richard Fluke, and I'm was talking to Karen Davidson the other day, and she was basically mentioning that she has some clients who go through a really traumatic time after she's been working with them. And when I say a traumatic time, they get some pretty unpleasant physical issues. So I wanted just to really give you some background and some information on that. But before we start, let me just explain briefly who I am. My name is Richard Fluke. I was the guy that basically brought what people and Karen's people know as meta medicine to the world, and also other people will know it as being meta health now. But basically, I went off and branched off because I discovered a couple of other things that were going on, especially how Mother Nature creates a disease, why she does that, and more importantly, what happens if you reverse that. And basically, Karen goes off and uses that with her clients. But what does cause a disease is something called the Udin moment. It's in my book, Why Am I Sick? And the Udin moment is something that's unexpected, dramatic, isolating, where we had no strategy for dealing with it. That's like coming home and a partner turning around to you and saying, sit down, you've been married to this person for 20-odd years, and you've had children, they've left home maybe, and you've got a car, a nice car, and a mortgage and all that sort of stuff. And they say, sit down, and I've got something to tell you. And you already know there's something wrong. Your heart starts racing, and basically they turn around and said, I've been sleeping with your best friend. That would be unexpected if you had no idea. Very dramatic. You've been married for that length of time, all that history behind you. Isolating the one person you want to talk to, you can't do because that's your best friend. No strategy. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't know what to do. And I'm sure someone who's been in a marriage for 20 years, happily married, so say, for 20 years, wouldn't know what to do. You can imagine they're in that type of situation, and they just wouldn't know what to do. You get on to something like what we call eHarmony over here, or one of those dating agencies on the internet. Not much fun. Anyway, so what follows one of these Udin moments is the body then goes into what I call the sympathetic nervous system. Now, we all have the sympathetic nervous system. We also have what follows the sympathetic nervous system as the parasympathetic nervous system. I'll go into what that is in a moment. And we have our Udin moment. We then go into stress. We then have what is called the Udin reversal, which is the bit that I know Karen wants me to talk about. And then following that, we have the repair, then the spike. And she really wants me to talk about the spike. And then we go into rebuild. And basically, that's the parasympathetic nervous system. So the thing is that most people, during this parasympathetic nervous system, points 4, 5, and 6, that's the repair, spike, and rebuild. I'll go into what those are in a moment. All of those particular things, well, they're painful. Honestly, that's when we end up going to see the doctor, and it's unpleasant. Now, here are the symptoms that often go and are associated with any disease. After a Udin moment, we have stress, tense body, obsessive thinking, sleeplessness, absence of appetite, loss of weight, cold in body and extremities, high blood pressure, contracted blood vessels and nervous, and cold perspiration. And then when, after this Udin reversal, which is when an energetic practitioner comes in and does all their amazing work, and they basically assist the body in reversing the stressful event, then the body starts to feel fatigue and tiredness. Over time, we get our appetite back. We'll put on weight. We'll have warm body and extremities, so we feel tired and fatigued. Our blood pressure returns from being high down into low. It's lower than normal. We get a slow heart rate. We get wide blood vessels. Basically, all that blood is no longer going into all the stress that we've been going through. Instead, it's going into assisting us in healing. We feel hot, we have perspiration, and we often get a fever as well. So let's get on to this spike though, because as I mentioned in this disease process, which is actually well written up in my book, Why Am I Sick? And you can get that, I think, on Amazon.com or wherever you particularly live. In the second half, that is the parasympathetic part of the disease process, we go through this Udin reversal, which we can have a natural Udin reversal. I'll give you an example of a natural one. Imagine that someone say to them their partner's been sleeping with their best friend, and then that particular individual goes into stress. You can imagine that. during all the whole time of the divorce. And then eventually they meet someone else and they realize, I've been living with this person for 20 years. I haven't really been as happy. And now I've met someone who really genuinely is the love of my life. That would be a true Udin reversal. And then during the height and the happiness of their life, they suddenly become ill. So that could be a Udin reversal. Now, often when we work with energetic practitioners, what we're looking at is those chronic diseases, and we are trying to unravel what has gone on and complete that Udin reversal. If an energetic practitioner does that, many do, then the body goes into that parasympathetic stage, the rest and repair and the rebuild stage. The interesting thing is that after this particular time, this rest time, the body can go into what is called the spike. Now, what is the spike? Well, the spike is a particular point that was noted by two homeopaths called Yerkes and Herxheim, and basically they said it appears that what the body does is it revisits the underlying problem that the person has been going through. It literally revisits that. It goes back and it checks in on the person and says, hey, have you really completed this process? How are you really truthful in what you have agreed and what you have learnt unconsciously and also consciously? Are you willing to do what you need to do to basically maintain this complete healing, this Udin reversal? So that's very much the sort of psychological side of it. But there's also a physical side of it. And this particular physical side of it is this, that during stage 4, which is the repair stage, you see the body's been working during the stress stage, just like you go to work. And then during the repair stage, it needs to repair the cells that have been working like crazy. During that repair stage, remember, we get a fever as well. We get a lot of water and we also get a lot of waste products produced. Now, the body has to get rid of that water and that waste. And how it does it is it does it during the spike. So it literally stresses the body. It's like a mini Udin moment. It stresses the body, which forces the water out of the system and forces the toxins and the waste out of the system. So if we look at the body, we get symptoms like diarrhea. We get say for an acne, a pimple, the pressure of the pimple becomes very intense and eventually it just pops. We get muscle cramps where the muscle literally is cramping like some sort of weird rhythm, and it's pushing out the excessive water and any excessive waste out of the system. We get migraines and headaches, and if you've ever experienced a migraine and headache, it's like this pumping mechanism going on inside the head, and it's very unpleasant. But the water is literally being pumped out of that area inside the brain and being pumped out to be recycled and passed out through our urine or through sweat. Also, a heart attack, it's the same type of thing. It's the musculature pumping away very fast to clear out where the body or the heart has actually healed itself. We also get this horrible coughing fit as well, where suddenly we can be just coughing our guts out, whereas we had maybe a tremendous amount of phlegm in our lungs, but suddenly the coughing just gets excessive and we almost can't breathe in certain instances. We also can get epileptic fits as well, literally where we are shaking, our whole body is shaking, and this can either be the brain or it can actually be musculature in the body where this stuff is being pumped out of our system. Often it's within the brain, and this is then having a direct effect on our nervous system. We can actually faint as well during the spike, or we can get the acute anxiety or even severe depression. I know that's not on this particular slide, but basically this is what's going on inside the spike. Now, most of these, especially the ones near the very end, are very scary, but I just want to reassure you, that's very rare. Very, very rare. I think in all my work in the 25 years that I've been doing this, I've had one client who has had a serious heart condition, or she had a very serious heart condition. And I told her, because I framed it up and I said, look, you could have an experience because we're dealing with your heart. I want you to have the hospital on speed dial and make sure that you have someone around you that you can contact immediately. And as I said, she had a serious, serious heart condition. So she knew exactly what she was doing. She'd been through several heart problems before, and sure enough, she did have a heart problem. She said, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as the ones I'd had before. And she did go to the hospital, and they were a little bit amazed that it wasn't anywhere near as bad as it was before. So I really want you to just understand, it's rare, very, very rare. But it is also equally not as rare that you might get severe diarrhea. And in fact, Karen was saying to me, she had one client that she said, well, you may get a problem. And sure enough, this client was out at a presentation. And then suddenly she had to run out of the presentation and do the biggest dump of her life. Excuse the expression, but basically she said it was quite funny. So, these things can happen. And she's had clients literally experience these unusual symptoms, and it is normal. Most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, you actually really don't notice them. You might get this little cramping in your leg or a bit of shaking in an arm, and then it just disappears. Or you might get a little, I just feel a little bit out of sorts, as you might just go, oh, okay, I don't know where I was just for a few minutes there, or actually 10 or 15 seconds. So that's basically what the spike is about. Now, I know someone's got a question. Oh, absolutely. I've had clients where I've worked with them on depression, and this is how I pre-frame it up with depression. I've said, okay, so we've cleared out all the depression. They say they feel absolutely amazing. They wondered why they were ever in that particular place before. And then I've said, look, you could just be feeling absolutely fine and then walking down the street, and then you'll get this bout of depression. The depression might last about 20 minutes and you may feel suicidal, because this is what other clients have actually said to me. I said, let it ride. It will go after 20 minutes. So you may have 3 or 4 of these, and they will get milder and milder as you go along. This is the body just resetting itself. Ride it. Go and sit down. Play a game on your cell phone. Just ride through it. It will go after 20 minutes. And sure enough, every single one of those clients has turned around to me and gone, you were right. I did go through this weird depression. I wasn't suicidal. I try not to really overemphasize it, but I have to just be a little bit careful, especially with something like that. That my experience has said, look, just let them know that this could happen, and if they have a mild depression, great, but it does go, and they go, wow, you are absolutely right. It just came and it went. And the same with anxiety. I've had clients that they felt, oh, no, felt absolutely great. And suddenly they get these pangs of anxiety and have a panic attack or a minor anxiety attack. And then suddenly, as quickly as it came on, it's disappeared. Now, the worry that I have and why I frame it up this way is purely and simply to say to the client, it will come and it will go. And it may repeat itself. It's just the body resetting itself. And that's really what the spike is. And to be aware that once it's done and it's completed its process, it's done. That you're not going back to your old ways, that it's just the body resetting itself. I can't help it. It's normal. It's completely natural. Okay? Does that answer your question, Patricia?
Yes, thanks. That's good.
Okay. Basically, the spike is not something to be feared, but it is something to respect. It is something to share with your clients and just let them know that they may go through some symptoms which are a little bit unusual. And not only is it a little bit unusual, it is something that 95% of the time they won't even notice. But they might actually get some adverse reactions. So just to bring it into their awareness, say they might get some adverse reactions, it's completely normal, and to let it ride. Now, if If the spike becomes really, really challenging, seek medical advice. But as I said, I've literally in the 25 years that I've been doing this, I've only ever had that once or twice. So, you've got to take it with a bit of pinch of salt, or just understand exactly what we're dealing with here. Are there any other questions?
Do you think by explaining to a client that they might have a spike that it could trigger one for them? You know how you can seed something in as a concept and then people do it.
This is where you've got to put your judgment into it and say, well, do I tell the client or don't I tell the client? Because chances of them having a reaction is pretty high. But chances of them noticing the reaction is very low. I've been through many, many a healing myself, and I've really had to pay attention to when the spikes come. Does that make sense? I've noticed it, and then I've gone, I've just been through a spike. Cool. I must tell my students about that. But you know what? If I wasn't actually aware of it, I probably wouldn't even have noticed it. And I know what these things are like. It's something that most of the time it just passes through. And you've been through spikes all your life. We've all had them. Including even if you cleared out a load of anxiety, you suddenly had a little bit of an anxiety, change. You suddenly gone really, really anxious, and then suddenly it's passed. You've gone, you didn't even notice it. So thank you for listening to this particular bit about the spike. It's a very, very interesting subject. And of course, this has been taken from a much larger training of ACE Level 2. There are several levels of advanced clear energetics. If you want to know a bit more about it, please do email me at richardfluke@whyamisick.com. The email's on the page here. Or go to the website, www.advancedclearenergetics.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. And until then, have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.